The train whistle echoed across the valley, long and hollow like a cry in the wind. Elijah Kane stood at the station platform, his hat pulled low, boots scuffed from months of waiting. He had worked his ranch with only his own 2 hands, and now he was waiting for the woman who was meant to share his life. A mail-order bride, a promise written in letters, a hope he had almost given up on. The people on the platform gave him long glances, some curious, some whispering. They all knew Elijah, a man who spoke little, carried scars no one asked about, and lived far from town. To them, he was the lonely rancher. To himself, he was a man trying to start over. When the train hissed and slowed, Elijah's heart pounded harder. He had written to a woman named Rose. She had sent him letters filled with gentle words and a photograph with soft eyes. He had built a new room in his house for her, planted flowers by the porch, even scrubbed his boots for the first time in years. He told himself this was the start of a different life. The doors opened. Passengers stepped down one by one. A merchant with cases, a family of 4, 2 gamblers smelling of whiskey. Elijah's eyes searched the faces, waiting for the woman who would carry the look of someone who belonged to him. Then he saw her. At first, he knew it was her by the way her eyes met his, wide and desperate, searching for a familiar face. She was younger than he expected, with dark hair pulled back and a plain dress that had seen too many miles. But something was wrong. 2 men came down with her, one on each side, rough men with coats too heavy for spring and eyes sharp with greed. And around her wrists, catching the morning sun, were iron chains. The crowd gasped. Elijah froze. This wasn't what the letters had promised. This wasn't the woman he had been waiting for. This was a woman dragged into town like a prisoner. The men jerked her forward. She stumbled, caught herself, lifted her chin with quiet pride. The chains clinked loud against the wood of the platform. "Step aside," one of the men barked at the onlookers. "Rail business. Nothing to see." But Elijah didn't move. His hands curled at his sides. His jaw tightened. Every scar on his soul burned hot. The woman's eyes met his again. And in that brief moment, Elijah saw the truth, fear hidden under strength, shame buried under courage. She was the woman he had written to, the woman who was supposed to be free. The crowd shifted uneasily. Some turned away, others whispered. No one stepped forward. No one but Elijah. He cleared his throat, voice steady but low. "That woman's mine." The 2 men laughed hard and ugly. "Yours?" the taller one said. "She's property of the line. Debt slave. Came west owing more than she's worth." He rattled the chains like proof. "Belongs to us until it's paid." Elijah's eyes stayed fixed on the woman. She trembled, but not from the men's grip. From shame, from the weight of being paraded like cattle. "Elijah Kane," she whispered, voice breaking. I wrote you. I didn't tell the whole truth. I had no choice." Her words cracked something inside him. She had carried a secret all the way across the country, wrapped in ink and silence, and now it stood before the whole town. The taller man shoved her forward. "Out of the way, cowboy. This one's bound for the rail camp, unless you got a stack of dollars to buy her contract." The crowd murmured, shifting closer but not close enough. Folks wanted a show, not a fight. Elijah's hand hovered near his belt. He wasn't sure yet if it would reach for money or steel. His heart thundered. He had asked for a bride, not a battle. But battles had a way of finding him. "Let her speak," he said, his voice carrying harder now. The shorter man sneered. "She'll speak when she's told. She's no bride. She's nothing but—" The crack of Elijah's boots on the platform cut him off as he stepped forward, close enough for the iron stink of the chains to burn his nose. "I said," Elijah growled, "let her speak." The woman lifted her chin. Her lips trembled, but her voice came clear. "They're telling half the truth. I owed a man back east. My brother was sick. I sold myself for his medicine. I thought I could pay it back. But the man sold the paper to them." Tears welled in her eyes, but she didn't look away. "I came west because I hoped you would see me as more than my shame." Silence cut through the platform. A widow gasped. A gambler cursed under his breath. Elijah's chest ached. She had risked everything, even her dignity, to come to him. Not for gold, not for land, for a chance. The taller man yanked the chain. "Enough sob story. She rides with us." Elijah's hand dropped to his belt, brushing the worn handle of his coat. He felt the weight of choice. One path meant silence, shame, and a woman lost to chains. The other meant blood on the station floor. The woman's eyes held his, wide, wet, pleading without words. The train hissed behind them. steam clouding the platform like smoke before a gunfight. Elijah stepped forward. "Not today," he said. The crowd held its breath. The men's hands went to their holsters. The woman's chains rattled once in the silence, and in that frozen second, everything in Elijah's life balanced on the edge of steel and smoke, one pull of a trigger away from blood or from setting her free. The silence before a fight is worse than the bullets. Elijah felt it crawl under his skin as the men's hands hovered near their pistols. The crowd shifted back, boots scraping the wood of the platform, whispering like dry leaves in the wind. Nobody wanted to stand too close when the shooting started. The woman in chains didn't move. Her chest rose fast, but her eyes stayed fixed on Elijah. He could see her hope trembling there, raw and thin, begging him not to turn away. The tall man laughed low. "You don't want this trouble, rancher. Walk away. You've got land, cattle, a quiet life. She ain't worth dying for." Elijah's hand hovered over his Colt. His knuckles brushed the grip, old and worn from years of hard use. He had promised himself he would never draw again, unless it was life or death. Right now he wasn't sure whose life or death it would be. "Take the chains off," Elijah said, his voice steady but edged with steel. The short man barked out a laugh. "Take 'em off? She's our pay, our mule. We sell her hours, she works 'em off. That's the contract." He spat to the side. "Unless you got money heavy enough to buy her freedom, best step aside." Elijah shifted his weight, boots firm on the boards. "Her life ain't for sale," the taller man sneered. "Everything's for sale." His hand twitched closer to the holster. Before Elijah could answer, the woman spoke. Her voice cracked, but she forced it out. "Please, don't kill anyone because of me." Those words cut deep. He had seen men fight for land, cattle, gold, rarely for people. But here she was, chained and broken, asking him not to bleed on her account. And yet every instinct in Elijah screamed the same truth. If he let her ride away with these men, she was lost forever. The tall man smirked. "Hear that? Even she knows you don't stand a chance." Something in Elijah snapped. His hand closed on the Colt. The steel-cleared leather fast and sure, aimed straight at the taller man's chest. The crowd gasped as one. "You'll drop those chains," Elijah growled. "Or you'll drop where you stand." The short man froze, eyes darting. He hadn't expected the quiet rancher to draw so clean. The tall man, though, grinned. "So the stories are true." Elijah Kane, the gun hand who vanished after the border war. His own pistol came up, been waiting to test that legend. The platform erupted. People scattered, diving behind crates, clinging to doorframes. Mothers clutched their children and ran. The gamblers cheered, hungry for blood. The woman flinched as the chain jerked against her wrists. Elijah's finger tightened. Then a sharp voice cut through the chaos. "Enough!" The town sheriff pushed through the crowd, a stout man with tired eyes. His badge glinted dull in the rising sun. He raised his hands between the guns. "Holster 'em, all of you. This is a town platform, not a graveyard." The tall man didn't lower his pistol. "Sheriff, this here's rail business. Out of your hands. She belongs to the company." The sheriff's jaw worked. He looked from the chain to the woman to Elijah. "If there's a contract, bring it to me. Until then, nobody leaves in irons." The short man snarled. "You can't override the company's claim." "I can," the sheriff said, "and I will until I see the paper." The crowd stirred. Whispers rose, half with the sheriff, half with the railmen. Tension thickened like smoke. Elijah lowered his gun a hair but kept it ready. "She's no property. She came here by promise, not by chain." The tall man sneered. "You really think your word outweighs ours? We got signatures. We got ledgers. She signed herself away and she ain't free until the debt's done." The sheriff rubbed his temple, weary. "Then we'll see the truth when the paper's laid out. Until then she stays here, guarded. Both sides wait." The woman sagged, torn between relief and dread. She had wanted freedom, but now she was caught in a fight bigger than herself. Elijah stepped closer to her. His voice dropped soft. "What's your name?" Her lips trembled. "Rose." That single word burned into him. He had whispered that name into the dark for months, thinking of the letters, the promises, and now she stood before him, bruised, bound, but still Rose. Elijah's chest tightened. He had prayed she'd be real. Now she was more real than he could bear. The sheriff motioned to 2 deputies. "Take her to the office. Keep her safe until this is sorted." The short man barked, "You'll regret this." But the sheriff ignored him. The deputies led Rose away, her chains clinking soft, her eyes still locked on Elijah's until the crowd swallowed her. Elijah holstered his gun, slow, deliberate. The tall man leaned close as he passed. His voice was low and filled with promise. "She'll never be yours, Kane. She's already owned." Elijah didn't answer, but inside fire roared. As the platform emptied, whispers spread like wildfire about Elijah Kane drawing again, about the woman in chains, about what the rail company would do next. The sheriff pulled Elijah aside. His eyes were tired but sharp. "Son, you just stepped into a storm bigger than you can see. Those men got coin lawyers' guns. If you push, they'll push back harder. You best think about how much this woman is worth to you." Elijah stared down the street where Rose had been taken. Worth? She wasn't gold or cattle. She was the promise of a life he thought he'd lost. He clenched his fists. "She's worth everything." The sheriff sighed. "Then you best be ready, because they won't let go easy." Elijah walked away, boots heavy, heart heavier. He had waited months for Rose, and now he had her, but wrapped in iron, claimed by men who treated her like dirt. He knew one thing for certain: he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not ever. But as he stepped into the dusty street, a cold thought struck him like a bullet. If Rose's story was true, then somewhere there was a contract with her name on it. And if he couldn't break it, no gun in the world would set her free. Elijah had sworn he would fight for Rose, but when the rail company brought their contract to town, signed and sealed, he would face a choice: break the law to save her, or lose her forever. The sheriff's office smelled of ink, whiskey, and tired leather. Rose sat in a wooden chair near the stove, her wrists still bound, though the deputies had loosened the chains. Her dress was wrinkled from travel, her eyes shadowed from nights without rest. Yet when Elijah stepped through the door, her face lit as if the sun itself had followed him in. "Elijah," she whispered, her voice cracking. "I didn't know if you'd come." He nodded once. His heart twisted, seeing her chained in a lawman's chair, treated as neither free nor prisoner, but something between. He wanted to cut the irons off her wrists and take her far into the hills. But he knew if he did, they'd be hunted to the ends of the territory. The sheriff leaned on his desk, papers spread across the wood. "Kane, you've stirred a hornet's nest. The railmen came in not 10 minutes after you left the platform. They put this down on my desk." He tapped a folded contract, thick with signatures and seals. "Claim says she sold herself for debt and is bound to the company until it's paid." Rose's face burned with shame. "It's true," she said softly. "My brother was dying. The doctor wouldn't give medicine without coin. I signed the paper." Tears filled her eyes and her hands shook. "I thought I could work it off back east. I didn't know they'd sell the paper west. I didn't know it would follow me here." Elijah stepped closer, his voice steady. "You're not property. Not to them. Not to anyone." The sheriff sighed, rubbing his temples. "Truth don't matter much when ink and wax are on a page. These men got power. Judges who owe them favors. If I tear this up, they'll haul me out by sundown and put another badge on someone willing to look the other way." Elijah's jaw clenched. "So the law's already bought?" "Mostly," the sheriff admitted. His tired eyes softened. "I don't like it, but I can't fight the company alone. If you stand, Kane, you stand against more than 2 hired men. You stand against a machine." Elijah looked at Rose. She was trembling, but her gaze never left his. She was waiting to see if he would run or if he would fight. He turned back to the sheriff. "Then I won't stand alone." The sheriff frowned. "You got friends who'll back you." Elijah thought of Ellis Carter, the old tracker who owed him from the border war. He thought of Hannah, the widow who worked her ranch with 3 boys and a shotgun. He thought of the few souls in town who still remembered the man he had been before he tried to bury his past. "I'll find them," Elijah said. The sheriff shook his head. "You best be quick. The company gave me until morning. They'll bring the judge on the noon train. Once he stamps this contract, her chains will be legal in every corner of the territory." Rose gasped. "No, Elijah." He knelt in front of her, his rough hands brushing her chained ones. "I gave you my word in those letters. I said I'd be here when you stepped off that train. And I am. I don't care what ink or seal says. You're mine, Rose, not theirs." Her lips trembled and she whispered, "Then you'll have to fight for me." His chest tightened. "I already am." Outside hooves clattered. Voices rose in the street. The shorter railman barked orders, while the taller one laughed loud. Elijah peered through the window. 4 more riders had joined them, rifles slung easy across their saddles. The company wasn't waiting for judges. They were preparing to take her by force. The sheriff cursed under his breath. "They're not even pretending anymore." Elijah straightened. Then I'll meet them. He pushed through the office door, stepping into the sunlight. Dust swirled on the street. The railmen turned, grins curling ugly when they saw him. Well, if it ain't the knight in dusty armor, the tall one mocked. Come to hand her over proper. Elijah's hand brushed his colt. His voice came hard. You'll not touch her again, the short man spat. You think you can stop us? We got men, money, papers, and soon enough a judge to stamp it. What do you got, Kane? A tired sheriff and your pride? Elijah stared at them, the sun hot on his neck, the whole town watching from porches and windows. I got a reason, he said flat. And that's more than you'll ever hold. The tall man's smirk faltered. For the first time his fingers twitched, not with arrogance but unease. Men who fight for coin fear those who fight for love. Still, he growled, we'll be back at dawn. If the judge don't claim her, we will. And there won't be law nor bullet enough to stop us. They turned their horses and rode off, laughter trailing like dust. Elijah stood in the middle of the street, every eye on him. He had drawn a line and the whole town knew it. He walked back inside, heart pounding. Rose's face was pale, her lips tight. They'll kill you, she whispered. Maybe, Elijah said. But if I don't stand, they'll kill you slower. She leaned toward him, chains clinking soft. Then what do we do? He looked to the sheriff. We've got till dawn. I need names, men who still got some fight left. The sheriff hesitated, then nodded. Ellis Carter, Hannah Boyd, maybe 2 others. But it won't be enough to match the company's guns. Elijah's eyes burned. Then we won't match them. We'll outlast them. Rose's voice trembled yet carried hope. If you fail? Elijah took her hands, chains cold between them. Then they'll have to kill me first. Her tears fell then, hot and sudden. But in them was something else, belief. The sheriff leaned back, shaking his head. I've started a war, Kane. Elijah's jaw set. No, they did when they put chains on her. The room went quiet, heavy with truth. The night ahead would be long. The dawn would decide everything. As darkness settled over town, Elijah gathered the names of those who might stand with him. But far down the tracks, a train whistle blew, carrying the judge, the company seal, and the death warrant for Rose's freedom. Night spread across the town, slow and heavy, like a blanket stitched from fear. The lamps in the sheriff's office glowed dim, casting long shadows over Rose's chains. Elijah stood at the window, watching the dark swallow the street. Every sound carried sharper at night. Horses snorting, a door creaking, the whisper of boots on gravel. The company's men were out there. He could feel their eyes waiting. Rose shifted in her chair. Her wrists were raw from the irons. Her shoulders slumped from the weight of shame. Yet when she spoke, her voice still carried strength. You don't have to do this, Elijah. They'll crush you. They'll crush anyone who stands with you. He turned to her, his face hard but steady. Rose, I buried too many things in my life. Brothers, friends, pieces of myself. I won't bury you, too. Tears filled her eyes and she whispered, Then promise me something. If you fall, don't let them take me alive. The words cut through him like a blade. He swallowed hard. I don't plan on falling. The sheriff rose from his desk. You better start gathering those names, Kane. Dawn will come quicker than you think. He handed Elijah a lantern and a list scrawled on paper. If anyone will back you, it's them. Elijah nodded once. He tipped his hat to Rose, catching her gaze one last time before stepping into the cool night air. The first place he went was the edge of town, where the pines bent low and smoke rose from a small cabin. Ellis Carter lived there, an old tracker with eyes like hawks and hands worn to bone. Elijah knocked once and the door opened slow. Ellis stood with a rifle in hand, grey hair tangled, scars running down his cheek. Elijah Kane, he muttered. Thought you were done with fights. I was, Elijah said. But they chained the woman who came to be my wife. They aimed to drag her off by dawn. Ellis spat in the dirt. Railmen? Elijah nodded. The old tracker's jaw tightened. I've hated them since the day they laid steel through my hunting ground. You'll have me. Elijah gripped his arm. I knew I would. Next was Hannah Boyd's ranch. The widow met him with a shotgun in her hands, 3 boys peering out from behind her skirts. Elijah Kane, she said, her eyes sharp. You always did find trouble. This time trouble found me, Elijah said. He told her about Rose, about the contract, about Dawn. I need fighters, Hannah. Just long enough to hold the line. She glanced at her boys, then back at him. I can't ride into town with 3 children in the house, but I'll send my eldest Matthew. He's 16, strong and quick with a rope. And I'll pray over your fight. Her boy stepped forward, chest puffed with pride, eager to stand. Elijah clasped his shoulder. "Thank you, Matthew. You'll do your family proud." Through the night, Elijah lit lanterns on porches, knocked on doors, and spoke plain to every soul who still had some fire left in them. Most turned away, fear eating their courage. Some cursed him for dragging them into a fight. But a few, just a few, said yes. By midnight he had 6. 6 against a company with gold guns and a judge in their pocket. Not enough, but enough to say Rose would not stand alone. Back in the sheriff's office, Rose sat waiting. Her chains had been removed for the night, though the marks still cut her skin. When Elijah entered, she rose, her eyes searching his face. "How many?" she asked. 6, he answered. "And Ellis, that makes 7 with me." She bit her lip. 7 against 20? 7 who know why they're fighting, he said. "That's worth more than coin." The sheriff frowned, pipe smoke curling from his lips. "It still won't be enough." Elijah leaned against the desk. "It has to be. At dawn we face them. We hold until the judge hears more than one side." The sheriff shook his head. "You think a judge paid by the company will listen?" Elijah's eyes burned. "If he won't listen to law, he'll listen to truth," shouted loud enough. "And if not, then he'll listen to my cult." Rose stepped close, placing her hand on his arm. Her touch was soft but steady. "You'll risk everything for me?" He looked down at her, voice low. "I already have." Her lips parted as if to say more, but the sound of hooves outside silenced her. Elijah moved to the window. Riders passed slow, torches in hand, faces hard. The company's men. They circled the sheriff's office like wolves around a pen. "They're watching," Ellis muttered from his chair, rifle across his knees. "Testing our nerves." Elijah turned from the window, his jaw like stone. "Then let 'em watch. Let 'em know we're ready." The night dragged heavy. Some dozed, some prayed. Some sharpened knives that might not matter come dawn. Rose sat close to the stove, her eyes never leaving Elijah. He felt her gaze on him, warm and heavy like a promise he couldn't let break. When the first pale light touched the sky, a whistle echoed down the tracks. The noon train had come early. The sheriff stiffened. "Judge is here." Elijah's gut clenched. He strapped on his colt, checked the chamber, and stepped outside. The town was awake, gathered along porches, whispering. At the end of the street, the train hissed, smoke curling into the grey sky. And stepping off the last car was a man in a fine black coat, papers tucked under his arm. The judge. Behind him, a line of railmen dismounted, rifles gleaming, twice as many as the night before. Their leader raised his voice, echoing across the street. "By order of the company and the contract signed by Rose Hart, she belongs to us. Hand her over, or we take her by force." Elijah stepped into the street, hand on his colt, his 7 standing behind him. His voice carried loud and steady. "Then you'll have to go through me." The judge frowned, opening the papers with calm hands. "This contract is sealed. Her debt is written. By law, she is bound." Elijah's chest heaved, rage burning through him. He shouted back, voice raw, "Law without justice is chains without keys." The crowd gasped, torn between fear and hope. The judge raised his hand, ready to seal Rose's fate with one stroke of ink. The judge lifted his seal. The company's men cocked their rifles. And in that breathless moment, Elijah realized he had only one chance left, to tear down more than chains, to tear down the very lie that bound her. The morning air was cold, sharp as a knife. Elijah stood in the center of the street, dust curling around his boots. Rose stood behind him with her wrists red from chains, her eyes wide and wet, staring at the judge like her life hung on his seal. The judge adjusted his coat, his face stiff and practiced. "This contract," he said, holding the paper high, "was signed in full by Rose Hart. It carries the mark of the company, witnessed and sealed. Her debt is written. Her labor belongs to them until it is paid." The company's men smirked. Rifles glinted in the rising sun. The tall man leaned on his saddle, grinning cruel. "You hear that, Kane? She's ours. Step aside before you end up a body in the dirt." Elijah's jaw clenched. He stepped forward, his voice booming across the street. "You call that law? A woman selling herself to save her kin, then having her papers sold like cattle? That ain't law. That's theft in ink." The judge frowned. "The contract is binding. I cannot tear it apart because your heart bleeds. Territory law protects the company's rights." Ellis Carter spat in the dust. "Territory law's worth less than mule dung if it don't protect the weak." The townsfolk stirred. Mothers clutched their children closer. Old men shook their heads. Some whispered, Others nodded. For the first time, the company's grip felt less solid. Rose's voice cracked as she cried out, "I was forced. My brother was dying. Do you call that a fair contract?" The judge hesitated. His eyes darted to the company's men, then back to Rose. "It is not my place to judge the heart, only the paper." Elijah's blood boiled. He pulled something from his coat, the letters Rose had sent, every page inked with hope, fear, and the promise of a new life. He held them high. "Then let the town judge," Elijah roared. "Here are her words written in her own hand. Does this sound like a woman willing to be chained? Or does this sound like a soul begging for a chance?" He began to read, his voice breaking but strong. "I pray you will still want me, Elijah. Though I am poor, though my hands are rough, I pray I may stand beside you, free, not as a burden, but as your wife." The crowd went silent. Every word fell heavy, like stones laid on a grave. Rose's cheeks flushed, tears spilling, but her chin lifted high. The judge shifted uncomfortably. "Letters are not law." "No," Elijah growled, "but they're truth, and truth weighs more than your ink." The tall man barked, "Enough talk. Hand her over." He spurred his horse forward. His rifle lifted, aimed straight at Elijah's chest. Before he could fire, Ellis's rifle cracked. The bullet tore a splinter from the man's saddle, sending his horse rearing. The rider cursed, nearly thrown. Elijah drew his Colt, leveling it with the man's heart. "One more step, and you're the first to fall." The street exploded in chaos. Men shouted, rifles cocked. The sheriff stumbled from his office, his own gun drawn. Hold your fire," he yelled. "You shoot here, half the town dies." But the company's men weren't listening. They spread wide, circling rifles ready. Their leader snarled, "You can't stop us, Kane. Judge or no judge, she's ours." Rose clutched Elijah's arm, her voice trembling. "Elijah, please." He tightened his grip on the Colt, his body coiled for the storm. "Stay behind me." The judge's face went pale as he saw the guns rising. This isn't lawful," he shouted, his voice cracking. The tall man sneered. "Law? We are the law." The sheriff's face hardened. He raised his pistol high. "Not today, you ain't." And in that breathless instant, the first shot rang out. No one saw who fired, but the bullet screamed down the street, slamming into a barrel and sending water spilling across the dust. In a heartbeat, rifles thundered. Smoke filled the air, and the quiet morning became a battlefield. Elijah shoved Rose behind a wagon and fired back, his Colt kicking hard in his hand. Ellis dropped to one knee, rifle steady, cutting down a rider who charged too close. Young Matthew Boyd swung a rope, pulling a gunman from his horse before he could line a shot. Rose covered her head, praying through the roar. The sheriff fired from his porch, shouting orders, his badge glinting in the chaos. The townsfolk scattered, screams rising as windows shattered. Bullets whined, horses screamed, men fell. Elijah's chest burned as a shot tore through his coat, grazing his ribs. He gritted his teeth, firing back, dropping one of the company's men where he stood. His heart hammered, not from pain, but from the sight of Rose huddled in the dirt, her eyes wide with terror. The tall man bellowed above the smoke, his voice carrying, "Kane, you can't win this. Give her up and we'll let the town live." Elijah's teeth clenched. His voice roared above the gunfire. "You want her? Then you'll have to bury me first." The crowd gasped, even in the chaos. Those words rang clear, louder than any rifle, louder than any threat. They were the vow of a man with nothing left to lose but love. The tall man snarled, raising his rifle again. Elijah leveled his Colt, their eyes locking across the smoke-filled street. Two men, one choice, one heartbeat away from ending it all. And then, from the edge of town, fresh riders appeared. Dust rose as more horses thundered in, rifles gleaming. Reinforcements. The company had brought more men, twice as many as before. Elijah's Colt was aimed true, his vows still ringing in the air. But as the new riders stormed in, outnumbering them 3-1, he realized the fight for Rose's freedom had only just begun. The thunder of hooves shook the ground. Fresh riders poured into town, their rifles flashing, their laughter sharp as knives. The company had sent more men than anyone guessed. Dust billowed through the street, swallowing the morning sun. Elijah's stomach clenched. He counted fast, 10, 12, maybe 15 more. They joined the rail thugs already there, their horses crowding the street like a black tide. Outnumbered 3-1. Ellis cursed under his breath. Hellfire, Kane, they brought an army. Elijah fired once, dropping a rider who charged too close. Then we hold, he growled. The sheriff's voice cut through the gunfire.
Fall back!
Get to cover! He waved townsfolk into doorways, pushing them away from the storm. But the company's men kept pressing, bullets snapping off walls, torches thrown toward wagons and crates. Rose huddled behind the wagon where Elijah had shoved her. Her dress torn, her face pale but her eyes burning. She clutched a broken chain link like it was a blade. When she saw him look her way, she shouted over the chaos, "Don't let them take me, Elijah." "I won't," he barked, firing again. His Colt kicked hot, smoke stinging his eyes. Matthew Boyd ducked under a horse, roping a rider's leg and yanking him down hard. The boy shouted, "Got one!" But a bullet tore the brim off his hat and sent him scrambling for cover. Hannah's prayers back at the ranch must have been holding him up, Elijah thought grimly. Ellis dropped another man clean, his old hands steady even under fire. "We can't keep this up," he shouted. "Then we buy time," Elijah snapped back. The tall man, the company's cruel hound, rode through the smoke, rifle raised, his face twisted with hate. "Kane, you can't win. Hand her over, and we'll let the rest of you crawl home alive." Elijah stepped into the open, blood seeping from the graze on his ribs. He raised his Colt, voice booming. "You'll get her over my grave." The tall man grinned, leveling his rifle. "That can be arranged." Their guns flared at the same breath. The Colt cracked, the rifle boomed, and smoke swallowed the moment. When it cleared, Elijah staggered, his Colt still smoking. The tall man clutched his arm, blood pouring from his shoulder, his rifle dropping into the dust. The company's riders roared with rage. Bullets screamed, horses thrashed, and the fight turned savage. The sheriff ducked low, pulling two townsfolk into cover. "Kane, they'll burn the town down to get her!" Elijah fired until his Colt clicked empty. He ducked behind the wagon where Rose crouched. His chest heaved, sweat and dust covering him. She clutched his arm, her eyes wide with fear. "Elijah," she whispered, "there's too many." He reloaded with shaking hands. "Then we make them pay for every inch." Rose grabbed his face, forcing him to look at her. "If you die here, they'll still drag me off. Don't fight just to fall. Find a way to take me out of this place." Her words cut deeper than any bullet. He wanted to stand and kill them all. But she was right. Dying meant nothing if she ended up in their hands anyway. Ellis slid into cover beside them. "We can't hold the street. Too many rifles. We need ground they can't flood." "Where?" Elijah demanded. "The quarry cut," Ellis said, breath ragged. "Narrow, high stone walls. They can't swarm us there." Elijah looked to the sheriff. The older man's face was grim, his badge dark with dust. "Can you hold the town if we draw them out?" The sheriff shook his head. "They want her, not us. If you run, they'll chase." "That's your chance." Elijah nodded. He turned to Rose. "Can you ride?" Her eyes burned through her tears. "With you, I can." He grabbed her hand, pulling her to her feet. "Then we run for the quarry." Ellis fired a cover shot, dropping another man. "Now's our only chance." Elijah whistled sharp. His horse, tied near the hitch, screamed and kicked, but bolted toward him through the smoke. Bullets cracked the ground as Elijah swung Rose into the saddle. He leapt up behind her, Colt ready. Ellis mounted fast, pulling young Matthew onto his horse. The tall man, clutching his bleeding arm, bellowed, "Don't let them escape." "After them." The company's riders spurred forward, their shouts echoing off the buildings. Elijah's horse surged down the street, hooves pounding. Rose clung to his arm, her hair whipping in the wind, her sobs lost in the roar. Bullets hissed past, splintering wood and shattering glass. The sheriff and the few townsfolk still brave fired from cover, slowing the chase. But the company's men kept coming, dust and death rolling behind them. Elijah drove the horse hard out of town toward the cut in the stone. His chest burned, his ribs ached, but he held Rose tight. Ellis and Matthew rode just behind, the boy clinging on, his eyes wide with terror but his grip steady. The riders closed in, their hoots and curses filling the air. One drew close enough to grab Rose's arm. So Elijah turned, firing point blank. The man fell from his saddle, the horse veering away. Rose gasped, burying her face in Elijah's chest. "Don't let go," she whispered, "and never," he said. The quarry walls rose ahead, sharp and high against the dawn. The path narrowed, rocky and twisting. Ellis shouted, "Almost there!" But behind them the riders pressed harder, closing the gap. Bullets tore into the dust at their heels. The tall man, pale from blood loss but still fierce, roared like a devil. "Run, Kane! Run until you choke! You can't hide her forever!" Elijah's horse stumbled on loose stone, nearly pitching them forward. He yanked the reins, steadying it, his jaw tight. They couldn't stumble now, not with death chasing their heels. Rose clung tighter, her voice barely a breath. "Elijah, if they catch us—" "They won't," he said, though fear clawed at his throat. The quarry mouth yawned wide ahead, narrow, shadowed, a place where men could be trapped or saved. Elijah drove his horse into the narrow cut, stone closing around them. Behind, the thunder of riders filled the canyon. Ahead, the shadows waited. And Elijah knew, once they entered, there would be no way out but blood. The quarry walls rose on both sides like stone giants, tall and jagged, shutting out the light. The narrow trail wound between them, just wide enough for two horses. Dust rolled under hooves, echoing off the rock. Elijah rode hard, Rose pressed tight against his chest, her arms gripping his coat like she could hold him to the saddle forever. Ellis and young Matthew followed close behind, the boy clinging tight, his face pale but his jaw set with stubborn courage. The thunder of hooves behind them grew louder. The company's riders were coming fast, their shouts bouncing off the stone, their rifles cracking sparks into the rock. "They'll choke us in here," Ellis shouted. Elijah's eyes scanned the wall, searching for an edge, a choke point. His chest burned with every breath, ribs aching from the graze. "Then we choke them first," he growled. They rounded a bend where the trail narrowed to a slot, hemmed by two boulders as tall as houses. Elijah pulled his horse short, dust rising around him. He swung down, dragging Rose with him. "Off the horse," he ordered. "Stay low." Ellis reined in, sliding from his saddle with his rifle ready. Young Matthew scrambled down, clutching a pistol too heavy for his hand. Rose's voice trembled. "We can't hold against them all." Elijah cupped her face, his eyes burning into hers. "We only need to hold long enough to make them bleed." The first rider appeared at the bend, rifle raised. Elijah fired before the man could aim. The shot echoed like thunder through the stone. The rider tumbled, his horse veering and crashing against the wall. The canyon exploded. Riders surged in, bullets sparking off the rock. Horses screamed, dust choking the air. Ellis dropped two more with steady shots. Young Matthew fired wild, his hands shaking, but the sound alone kept the riders from charging straight through. Rose crouched behind a boulder, her dress torn, eyes wide with terror. Yet even in fear, she clutched a broken chain link like a dagger, ready if one came close. The tall man rode in, his wounded arm bound in cloth, his face twisted with rage. "Trap yourselves, Kane. Fools move. You'll die penned like hogs." Elijah shouted back, his voice raw. "Better to die free than live chained." Their eyes locked across the dust. The tall man snarled and lifted his rifle. Elijah fired, but the bullet sparked harmless against stone. The rider ducked back, laughing low and cruel. The canyon roared with gunfire. Bullets tore splinters from the boulders, chips stinging Elijah's face. Ellis grunted, a line of blood carving his sleeve, but he didn't falter. He chambered another round and fired, dropping a rider who had dared push too close. "3 left on the flank," Ellis barked. "I see them." Elijah snapped. He leaned out, his Colt steady. 2 shots, 2 men fell. The third wheeled his horse and fled back down the trail, shouting for reinforcements. Elijah ducked back behind cover, his chest heaving. His eyes found Rose. She stared at him like he was the last thing keeping her alive. He reached out, grabbing her hand, squeezing it hard. "We're not done yet." She swallowed her fear and whispered, "Neither am I." The tall man's voice echoed down the canyon. "Kane, you can't win. For every one you drop, 10 more ride the rails. Hand her over now, and maybe they'll let the boy live." Young Matthew's face went red with fury. "Don't you dare," he shouted, his voice cracking. He raised his pistol with both hands and fired. The shot went wide, but the sound silenced the canyon for a breath. Even the tall man paused, startled at the boy's fire. Elijah pulled Matthew down behind cover. "Brave, but don't waste bullets." Matthew's jaw clenched. "I ain't letting them take her." Elijah nodded once. The boy had more grit than most grown men. The fight dragged on. Bullets rang off stone. Horses screamed. The canyon filled with smoke and dust. Elijah's Colt grew hot in his hand, emptying fast. Ellis's rifle cracked slower now, each shot careful, every round counted. Then through the smoke Elijah saw movement, a rider climbing the canyon wall, crawling up the rocks like a spider. His eyes widened. "They're coming from above." Ellis cursed, firing, but the man kept climbing, dragging a rope with him. Soon more followed, scrambling up the stone, aiming to drop down from the cliffs. Rose gasped. "Elijah!" He grabbed her shoulders. "Stay here. Don't move." He pushed out into the open, firing at the climbers. One fell, crashing into the dust below. But two more reached the top, their rifles flashing as they fired down. Bullets rained from above. Ellis dove for cover, swearing. Matthew screamed as a round tore his sleeve, grazing his arm. Rose threw herself over him, shielding the boy with her body. Elijah's heart pounded. They were being closed in. The tall man's voice boomed again, filled with triumph. "End of the trail, Kane. You can't fight the cliffs. You can't fight the law. Hand her over and I'll leave you breathing." Elijah stood in the dust, his Colt raised, his face carved with fury. His voice echoed off the stone. "You'll never have her. Not while I draw breath." The tall man laughed, cruel and certain. "Then your breath ends today." The riders above lifted their rifles, aiming down at Rose. She clutched Matthew tight, her face pale but her eyes blazing. Elijah saw it, his stomach twisting. He couldn't shield them all. He had one choice, one chance, and not enough bullets left. The rifles above glinted in the sun, their barrels fixed on Rose. Elijah raised his Colt, knowing he could save her, or fall trying. And in that breathless moment, he realized the canyon itself might be the only weapon left. Stone can be cruel, but it can also be kind if a man asks it right. Elijah looked up at the riders on the rim and felt the shape of the canyon in his bones. He saw cracks and seams, a slab that leaned like a door held by one bad hinge. The wind sang a thin warning along the edge. "Ellis," he called, "the wedge above the right wall, see it?" "I see it," Ellis answered, crouched with his rifle and a torn sleeve. "If we drop it, we choke the trail," Elijah said. "Maybe scare the horses, maybe more." Bullets snapped. Chips stung his cheek. Above, a rider set a knee on the rim and aimed at Rose. Matthew flinched and tried to rise. Rose dragged him close. "Stay low," she said, fierce through fear. Elijah slid to Ellis. The old tracker's hands stayed sure. Elijah leaned out, raised his Colt at the wedge and fired. The shot rang, dust fell. The wedge held. "Steel on stone," Ellis muttered. "You'll need a bigger bite." "I only need luck," Elijah said. He took Ellis's rifle, set the sights, breathed out, and squeezed. The slug hit hard. The wedge jumped. "Again," Ellis said. Elijah fired. The wedge shifted, then stuck. On the rim, the tall man barked orders. "Flank them!" "Drop rope." Rope slapped the wall. One swung near Rose. Matthew sawed at it with his small knife. His hand shook. Rose covered his hands with hers. Fiber by fiber it gave. Elijah chambered again and shot the seam. The wedge spat free. For a breath, nothing moved. Then the slab groaned and slid. Stone tore stone. It crashed across the slot, throwing dust and shards. A horse reared and fell. 3 mounts bolted blind. The rope near Rose went slack and dropped. Ellis gave one short cheer. Good. The grey cloud thickened. Elijah pulled Rose and Matthew deeper. "Breathe slow. Cover your mouth." From beyond the fall, the tall man raged. "Push through. Find the side path." Ellis shook his head. "There's a high path, narrow and loose. They'll try it." "Then we make it meaner," Elijah said. They scrambled along the inner wall to a shelf no wider than a boot. Matthew stayed with Rose, pistol clutched in both hands, eyes on shadow. Elijah and Ellis found a ledge of broken rock. They set their backs and shoved. It tore free, clattering down the side path like a rain of iron. A man slipped. A rifle spun into dust. "Bought us time," Ellis panted. "Not enough," Elijah said. A shot cracked. Ellis staggered and went to a knee. Blood spread dark on his side. Elijah caught him. "Hold on." "I'm here," Ellis said through his teeth. Rose ripped a strip from her skirt and pressed it to the wound. "Hold this," she told Matthew. The boy nodded, lip caught between his teeth. Beyond the slab, the tall man shouted for oil and fire. Elijah felt the ground hum. Smoke would flood the slot if the blaze took. He looked up. A dead cedar trunk lay wedged in a cleft. Below it hung a pocket of loose gravel. "Can you bring it down?" Rose asked. "Maybe. Give me 2 shots." He braced the rifle and fired. Dust puffed. He fired again. The trunk slid, knocked the gravel loose, and the slope poured like water. Men cursed. A horse screamed. A rope snapped. "Dynamite!" the tall man yelled. "Bring it up." Elijah's stomach went tight. "They'll blast the slab." "Then we move," Rose said. "Deeper in," Elijah said. "There's a chimney past the bend. We climb, reach the high shelf, and circle." He slung Ellis's arm over his shoulder. Rose gripped Matthew's hand. They moved fast along the wall, counting steps with their palms. Behind them, a fuse scratched to life with a hateful hiss. At the bend, a narrow crack climbed left like a throat in the stone. Elijah boosted Matthew first. Rose followed, skirts ripping. Elijah shoved Ellis up and hauled himself after. The fuse spat louder. The tall man laughed. "Blow it." They pressed into the chimney and held their breath. The blast hit like a hammer. Light and grit slammed through the slot. The slab jumped and cracked. Shards screamed past. The canyon moaned. Rose wrapped both arms around Matthew. Ellis rode the quake with a broken prayer. Silence rushed in, ringing. Then hoofbeats again, bold now, closer. "They opened it," Ellis rasped. Elijah peered down. The blast had bitten a narrow gap, just enough for single file. Smoke hugged the ground. Shapes moved in it, riders low, rifles up. His mind ran like a creek. The chimney rose 10 feet to a ledge. From there, a thin rib crossed over the slot to the far wall. Beyond lay brush and a shadowed shelf. "Up," he said. Now. They climbed. Rock tore skin. Breath burned. Elijah crossed the rib first, arms wide, boots careful. He reached back for Rose and pulled her safe. Matthew crept after. Ellis last, teeth bared, sweat cold on his brow. A shout rose below. "There, above us." A shot cracked. Stone jumped at Elijah's boot. He flinched. Rose grabbed his belt and yanked him flat. They crawled to the shadowed shelf and pressed to the cool wall, hearts too loud. The tall man's voice lifted, cold with joy. "No more holes, Kane. Nowhere left to climb." Elijah whispered in Rose's ear, "When I move, run with me." Left, then down into the brush. "Ellis, can you follow?" "I can," Ellis said, though his voice shook. Below, a man struck another fuse. The wick burned bright toward a bundled stick tucked in a crack at the broken edge. Elijah saw it. One stick would lift the rest. The shelf would turn to knives. He had 2 bullets left. He raised the rifle and aimed at the wick. His breath slowed. The fuse spat and raced. "Now," he whispered, and fired. The shot met fire. The rifle cracked, echoing through the canyon like thunder. Elijah's shot struck the fuse just as it hissed toward the bundle. For a breath, nothing happened. Then sparks sprayed, fire split, and the bundle blew early. The blast rocked the walls. Smoke boiled. Men screamed. Horses reared, their cries sharp as knives. A slab of rock tore loose from the rim, crashing down onto the trail, crushing 2 riders flat. Dust rolled like a storm cloud, choking sight and sound. Rose clung to Matthew, her nails digging into his back. The boy pressed his face into her shoulder, shaking. Ellis dropped against the wall, coughing, blood fresh on his lips. Elijah's ears rang, his chest heaving, but he didn't let go of his rifle. Through the smoke, the tall man's voice rose, raw with rage. "Kane, you'll bury us all in this cursed hole. You think you can win against iron and fire?" Elijah's jaw locked. He shouted back, his voice hoarse but fierce. "I don't need to win against fire. I only need to keep her free." The tall man's laughter cut through the dust, cruel and sharp. "Free? You call that freedom? Hunted, cornered, broken? She belongs to us, Kane. And when I drag her out, you'll watch her chains close for the last time." Rose stiffened, tears cutting paths through the dust on her face. She whispered into Elijah's chest, "Don't let him take me." "Not alive." Elijah cupped her chin, forcing her eyes to meet his. "I swear, Rose, not while I breathe." More riders pushed through the smoke, their silhouettes twisting like shadows. Rifles flashed. Chips flew from the stone where Elijah crouched. He fired back, emptying the Colt. Every bullet meant for the men who threatened her. One fell, another cursed, but still more pressed forward. Ellis groaned, clutching his wound. "Kane, I can't hold much longer." Elijah's stomach turned. The old tracker was spent, his strength bleeding into the dust. Matthew knelt beside him, the pistol shaking in his boy's hand. "I'll fight," the boy said through clenched teeth. "I ain't letting them win." Elijah pulled Matthew close, his voice low but sharp. "You guard her. That's your fight. You keep her safe when I can't." Matthew swallowed hard, then nodded, his grip firming on the pistol. Rose touched his shoulder, pride and fear mixing in her eyes. The tall man appeared through the smoke, his wounded arm bound tight, his rifle steady in his other hand. His face was pale, but his grin was savage. "This ends here, Kane. You've dragged enough fools into your grave." Elijah stepped forward, dust swirling around him, his Colt nearly spent. He raised it anyway, pointing it at the man's heart. "Maybe it does. But I'll drag you down first." The canyon held its breath. The tall man's eyes flicked past Elijah, to Rose. His grin widened. She's worth more than your life, Kane. I'll kill you slow, then teach her what chains mean. Rose's face burned red, her eyes shining with fury. She stood, her broken chain link still clutched in her hand. You'll never touch me, she spat. The tall man's rifle snapped up toward her. Elijah fired. The Colt cracked. The bullet struck, spinning the tall man's hat clean from his head. He staggered, snarling. Close, but not enough. He lifted his rifle again, and then from behind him a sound broke the canyon, the whistle of a train. Everyone froze. The smoke thinned. Through the crack in the rocks, the iron engine rolled across the tracks above the quarry. The noon train had been delayed by the blast, but now it screamed past, carriages rattling, wheels grinding steel. The tall man's face twisted. "The judge!" he shouted. "He's still on board!" Elijah's heart slammed. If the judge reached the company's next stop, he'd sign the contract there, binding Rose forever. Rose gasped. "Elijah, if he stamps that paper—" Elijah turned to Ellis. "Can you hold them here?" Ellis spat blood and grinned weak. "Long as I draw breath." Elijah grabbed Rose's hand. "We have to reach that train." Matthew's eyes widened. "How?" Elijah's gaze shot to the rim above, where the narrow rib of stone led toward the tracks. "We climb." The tall man snarled, charging through the dust. "You won't reach it alive." Elijah shoved Rose toward the wall. "Climb, Rose, now!" She scrambled up the rock, Matthew close behind. Elijah fired his last round at the tall man, forcing him back. Then he leapt, grabbing the stone, hauling himself after her. His arms burned, his ribs screamed, but he climbed. Below, Ellis fired his rifle one last time, his roar echoing. The canyon swallowed him and the riders, dust hiding their fates. Above, the train roared past, steam and steel shaking the earth. Elijah pulled Rose onto the rim, her chest heaving, her eyes wild. Matthew scrambled beside them. The tracks stretched ahead, the caboose of the train rolling just beyond reach. Elijah's voice came like thunder. "Run! If we don't catch it now, she's lost." They sprinted along the rim, boots slipping on loose stone, the train clattering just ahead. Rose stumbled, Elijah catching her before she fell. Matthew pumped his arms, desperate to keep up. Behind them, the tall man clawed up the wall, bloodied but unbroken, his face a mask of hate. He leveled his rifle, his breath ragged, his voice like a curse. "You'll never outrun me, Kane." Elijah didn't look back. He gripped Rose's hand tighter, his voice a ragged growl. "Then catch me if you can." The train thundered ahead, the caboose within reach. Elijah leapt for the ladder, Rose's hand in his. But behind them the tall man's rifle cracked, the bullet screaming through the air. The train roared like a beast of iron, steam clouding the morning sky. The caboose rattled past just ahead. Elijah ran harder than he ever had. Rose's hand locked in his, Matthew right behind, his small legs flying. A rifle cracked. The bullet screamed past Elijah's ear. Rose stumbled with a cry, but Elijah yanked her up without breaking stride. "Hold on," he barked. The caboose ladder swung into reach. Elijah leapt, catching the rung with one hand, Rose's with the other. For one breathless moment she dangled, her eyes wide with terror until he hauled her up. Matthew leapt too, his fingers catching the lower rung. Elijah reached down, dragging the boy to safety. All three clung to the rattling steel, the train thundering beneath them. Then came the tall man, clawing his way up from the rim, bloodied but wild-eyed. With a roar he leapt, boots crashing onto the caboose. His rifle swung like a club, smashing into Elijah's shoulder. Elijah staggered but held firm, Rose clutching his coat to keep him upright. "You should have left her." The man snarled. "No woman is worth this much blood." Elijah's voice came like iron. "She's worth more than your whole company." They grappled on the swaying platform, fists striking, boots scraping steel. The tall man lunged for Rose, seizing her arm.
"She belongs in chains,"
he spat. Rose screamed, fighting against his grip. Elijah tore the man back, slamming him into the rail. The train jolted. The man's boot slipped. For a moment he hung there, fingers clawing at the steel. His eyes burned with hate. Then his grip failed. He tumbled, vanishing into the dust below. Rose collapsed against Elijah, shaking. Matthew clung to them both, his chest heaving. Elijah wrapped his arms around them, holding tight. But it wasn't finished. He led them forward along the swaying cars, wind whipping, steam stinging their faces. They burst into the passenger car. Fine-dressed men gasped as Elijah stormed in, Colt steady in his hand, though nearly empty. The judge sat at a table, the contract before him, seal poised. His face went pale. "Kane, you've lost your mind." No, Elijah growled. I found it. Tear it up. The judge shook his head, sweat beading his brow. The company owns half this land. I can't fight them. Rose stepped forward, voice trembling but fierce. Then don't fight them. Fight for what's right. I signed that paper to save my brother's life, not to live as a slave. The passengers whispered, eyes on the judge. Elijah pressed closer, his voice low and steady. Tear it up, or I swear your seal won't save you. The judge's hand shook. For a long, cold breath, no one moved. Then the judge ripped the paper in two. The pieces fluttered to the floor, useless at last. The car went silent. Then Rose let out a sob of relief. Matthew laughed through his tears. Elijah lowered the Colt, his chest easing for the first time in years. You're free, he whispered to her. She fell into his arms, trembling with joy. You kept your word, Elijah. You were there when I stepped off that train. He kissed her hair, his voice soft but sure. And I'll be here every step after. Matthew leaned against them, the boy who had stood tall when grown men shrank. The judge slumped in his seat, beaten by truth, not bullets. The company won't forget this. They'll come for you, Kane. Elijah's eyes burned steady. Then let them. I've got nothing to hide. I'll stand in the open the way a man should. The train carried them on, steam billowing into a sky wide and wild. For the first time since Rose stepped onto that platform, her hands were free, her future her own. Elijah tightened his arm around her. He wasn't an outlaw, not a drifter, not a man running from law or past. He was a rancher, a protector, a man who had found something worth more than land or gold. He had found family. Final resolution, corrected. The rancher who swore he'd never fight again had risen to protect what was his. The woman who arrived in chains now walked free, and the boy who feared had found courage in their shadow. Together, they rode not into darkness but into the wide, untamed light of the frontier, where freedom was fought for and sometimes finally won.